The man who made millions playing a gangster on television actually lived that life before anyone ever handed him a script. Tony Sirico walked out of a Brooklyn courthouse in 1971 with a 4-year prison sentence hanging over his head. He was 29 years old, 28 arrests already on his record. 3 guns found on him when the police searched him. The judge called him an antisocial character who drove expensive cars and wore expensive clothes despite having no real job. Tony knew exactly what that meant. The judge was calling him a criminal. And you know what? The judge was right. Tony Sirico was a full-time criminal. But inside that maximum security prison called Sing Sing, something happened that nobody expected. Something that would change everything. Let me take you back to where it all started. Brooklyn, New York, 1942. World War II was raging across the ocean. Back home, Italian families packed into neighborhoods like East Flatbush and Bensonhurst. Tony's father cut hair in a small shop. His mother raised the kids. They were trying to build the American dream one day at a time. But young Tony, he saw different role models on those Brooklyn streets. He watched the wise guys, the guys with nice cars, the guys who walked into restaurants and everyone showed them respect, or maybe it was fear. When you are a kid, you cannot always tell the difference. By age 7, Tony got arrested for stealing nickels from a newspaper stand. 7 years old, and already in trouble. Most kids would learn their lesson. Tony saw it as his first war story. The neighborhood he grew up in was rough. Irish kids lived on one side, black families on another. Italian families like Tony squeezed in between, and these groups did not get along. They fought a lot. Tony learned early that if you wanted respect, you had to be tough. You had to show you could not be pushed around. He dropped out of high school. Who needed books when the real education was happening in the streets? As a teenager, something happened that should have been a wake-up call. Tony was with a girl. Some Irish kids did not like it. They confronted him right on the steps of a church. St. Patrick Cathedral. Tony was kissing this girl when suddenly shots rang out. They shot him in the leg. Most people would run. Most people would scream and try to get away. Not Tony. When he saw the blood all over his new white suit, he got angry, really angry. He started running toward the guys who shot him. Can you imagine that? Instead of running away from danger, he ran straight at it. They shot him again. This time in the back. Only then did Tony finally stop chasing them. But that shooting did not scare Tony straight. It made him harder, tougher, more determined to prove nobody could mess with him. He started carrying guns, multiple guns. One time, when police arrested him and searched him, they found 3 guns. 3. When they asked why he needed 3 guns, Tony shrugged and said he lived in a bad neighborhood. And here is the crazy part. He was not lying. In his world, if you were not carrying a gun, you were like a rabbit during hunting season. Easy prey. Tony joined the army for a short time, served his country, got out and came right back to Brooklyn. Right back to the same streets, right back to the same life. Only now he was deeper in. He fell hard for a woman. Completely crazy in love. Problem was, Tony was already married. He had 2 kids, a daughter named Joanne, a son named Richard. But this new woman had him going insane. He left his wife and kids for her, and Tony became violent about this woman. If any guy even looked at her, Tony beat them up. He later admitted he was unstable during this time. Not thinking straight. He got involved with stick-up crews, guys who robbed nightclubs and businesses. Tony said he stuck up every nightclub in New York. That was not a joke. That was his job. The money was good. The lifestyle was exciting. But the police were watching. They arrested him over and over. 28 times total. Disorderly conduct, assault, robbery, extortion, weapons possession. Tony beat most of the charges, only got convicted twice. He joked about it later, saying he had a pretty good acting record, 28 arrests and only 2 convictions. Maybe he was already an actor and just did not know it yet. February 1970. Tony was at a restaurant when police showed up. They searched him and found a loaded gun, a .32 caliber revolver. They arrested him on the spot. This time the prosecutors were done playing games. They charged him with extortion, coercion, and weapons possession. They painted him as a career criminal who contributed nothing to society but took from everybody else. The jury found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in Sing Sing prison, one of the toughest prisons in all of New York. Sing Sing, just the name sounds scary. High walls, violent inmates, guards who did not take any nonsense. Tony was 32 years old when he walked through those prison gates. Some men go into prison and come out worse, harder criminals, more connected to the underworld. Tony was heading down that same path. Then one day, something different happened. A theater group came to perform for the inmates. Not professional actors, these were former criminals themselves. Ex-convicts who had found a new path through acting. They called themselves Theater of the Forgotten. Tony sat there watching these guys perform. These were men just like him. Men who had done time. Men who knew the streets. But now, they were making people laugh. Making people pay attention. Without guns, without violence, without breaking any laws, they were using their voices, their presence, their ability to tell stories. And people respected them for it. Tony thought to himself, I can do that. I know I am not bad looking. I have the guts to stand up in front of people. In prison, you learn how to talk your way out of situations. You learn how to make even the most dangerous guys listen to you. Tony had been doing that his whole life. Why not get paid for it? When Tony got released after serving 20 months, he had a plan. He was going to become an actor. Now, most people told him he was crazy. 32 years old. No education, criminal record longer than most resumes. Thick, Brooklyn accent, and a face that screamed tough guy. Hollywood was not exactly calling for men like him. But Tony knew one thing. He knew the streets better than any acting school could teach. He knew how real criminals walked, talked, and thought. If he could just get his foot in the door, he could show people something they had never seen before: real authenticity. An actor named Richard Castellano helped Tony land his first role. Castellano had played a character in The Godfather. He understood the value of authenticity in mob movies. Tony got cast as an extra in a film called Crazy Joe. No lines, just standing in the background. But Tony did not care. He was on a movie set. He was acting. He was not breaking the law. This was his new beginning. He got his Screen Actors Guild card. That little card meant everything. It meant he was legitimate now. A real actor. The work came slowly. Small roles here and there. Tony studied acting. Took classes. Worked with coaches like Michael Gazzo. He appeared in movies and television shows throughout the 1970s and 80s. Nothing major. Just small parts as tough guys and criminals. Which made sense. That was what he knew. Directors did not have to teach Tony how to be threatening. He had lived it. When Tony walked on screen as a gangster, audiences believed it. Because it was real. Then Tony started getting noticed by bigger directors. Woody Allen cast him in multiple films, 7 films total. Allen loved actors who brought real-life experience to their roles. Tony appeared in Bullets over Broadway, Mighty Aphrodite, several others. These were good movies, respected films. Tony was building a solid career. But he still was not a star. He was a working actor, a character actor. Guys like him did not become famous, they just worked steady. In 1990, Martin Scorsese cast Tony in Goodfellas, one of the greatest mob movies ever made. Tony played a character named Tony Stacks, a mobster who reported to a boss named Paulie. This would become funny later, really funny. Goodfellas was a huge movie. It showed the world that Tony could hold his own alongside major actors like Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. But even after Goodfellas, Tony was not getting lead roles. He was 55 years old, living with his mother, sleeping on her couch. Think about that for a second. A 55-year-old man sleeping on his mother's couch trying to make it as an actor. Most people would have quit, would have said this dream is not going to happen, would have gone back to whatever they could do to survive. Not Tony. He kept showing up to auditions, kept trying, kept believing. Then, in 1998, an audition came up for a new show on HBO. A show about a New Jersey mob family. The creator was a guy named David Chase. The show was called The Sopranos. Tony auditioned for the role of Uncle Junior, an older mobster, one of the main characters. But another actor named Dominic Chianese got that part. David Chase saw something special in Tony though. Something he could not ignore. Chase offered Tony a different role. A character named Paul Gualtieri, nicknamed Paulie Walnuts. Tony asked one question before he accepted. Could his character ever become a rat? Could Paulie ever become an informant? Chase promised that would never happen. Tony took the role. Nobody knew what The Sopranos would become. Nobody could have predicted it. The show premiered in January 1999. Within weeks, it became the biggest thing on television, 12 million people watching every episode. Critics calling it the greatest show ever made, and Paulie Walnuts became a fan favorite. Why? Because Tony brought something to that character that no acting school could teach. He brought truth, real truth. The way Paulie walked, the way he talked, the paranoia, the loyalty. All of it came from Tony real life. He knew these guys. He had been these guys. David Chase understood what he had. The writers would sit with Tony and listen to how he spoke. They heard the rhythm of his voice, the phrases he used, the way he expressed himself. Then they would write those exact words into the script and give them back to Tony to say. Paulie Walnuts was not just a character. Paulie was pieces of Tony Sirico real life brought to the screen. One of Tony's storylines on the show was that Paulie lived with his mother. That was real. Tony had lived with his mother for 16 years before she passed away. Chase knew that. He put it in the show. The money started coming in. In the early seasons, Tony made about $75,000 per episode. That is good money. But as the show exploded in popularity, Tony and his co-star Steven Van Zandt decided they deserved more. Much more. They negotiated hard. Really hard. At one point, people compared the negotiations to a mob shakedown, which was pretty funny given what show they were talking about. HBO initially offered them just a 10% raise. Tony and Van Zandt held firm. They wanted $200,000 per episode. Eventually, they got it. By the final seasons, Tony was making over $200,000 per episode. Let that sink in. The same guy who had been arrested 28 times. The same guy who served time in Sing Sing. The same guy who was sleeping on his mother's couch at 55 years old. That guy was now making $200,000 per episode on the biggest show in television. For all 86 episodes, Tony earned millions. The Sopranos ran for 6 seasons, ended in 2007 with one of the most talked about finales in television history. Tony appeared in every single episode. 86 episodes. He won 2 Screen Actors Guild Awards with the cast. Critics loved him. Fans loved him. Tony Sirico had become a star. But success did not change who Tony was inside. He stayed humble. He used his fame to help others. He raised money for charity. St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Organizations that helped veterans. Tony understood what it meant to get a second chance. He wanted to help others get their second chances too. He launched a cologne called Paolo per Uomo in 2008. He did voice work on Family Guy, playing a dog named Vinny for a few episodes. He appeared on American Dad. He reunited with Sopranos cast members for other projects. Even in his 70s, Tony kept working. Acting had saved his life. He was not about to stop, but behind the scenes, Tony was fighting a battle he could not win. He was diagnosed with dementia, a disease that steals your memories. That takes away who you are piece by piece. For someone whose career was built on sharp memories of the streets, on authentic experiences from his past, this must have been devastating. Tony kept the diagnosis private for years. He worked as long as he could. But dementia does not care who you are or what you have accomplished. It just takes and takes. On July 8, 2022, Tony Sirico passed away. He was 79 years old. He died at an assisted living home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. His brother Robert, who became a Catholic priest, announced his death. No official cause was given, but people who knew him understood. Dementia had taken its toll. The reaction was immediate. Fans around the world mourned. Fellow actors posted tributes. People who had never met Tony felt like they lost someone they knew. Because, in a way, they had. Paulie Walnuts was real to them. And Paulie was Tony. Tony left behind his two children, Joanne and Richard. He had left them when they were young. That created distance, pain, regret. But in his later years, Tony worked to repair those relationships. After his death, Joanne posted a photo of herself dancing with her father. That photo said everything. They had found their way back to each other. Richard followed his father into entertainment, working behind the scenes as a construction coordinator on over 50 films and television shows. Both children carried forward their father's legacy. At the time of his death, Tony had about $8 million. $8 million from a man who started with nothing but a criminal record and a wild dream. That money came mostly from The Sopranos. But also from movies, from his cologne, from other projects. More importantly, Tony left behind something money cannot buy. He left behind proof that people can change. That it is never too late. That your past does not have to be your future. Tony's funeral was held at a church in Brooklyn. The same Brooklyn neighborhoods where he grew up as a criminal, where he got arrested 28 times, where he should have died in prison or on the streets. Now those same neighborhoods came out to honor him, to celebrate what he became. His brother led the service. Friends spoke, family cried. Fans gathered outside. Tony Sirico's journey had come full circle. Tony Sirico died at 79 years old. He left behind millions of dollars, 2 children, 1 unforgettable role. And most importantly, he left behind a story that gives hope to anyone who thinks they have gone too far down the wrong road. Because if Tony Sirico could turn his life around after 28 arrests and a prison sentence, then maybe anybody can. That is the real legacy, not the money, not the fame, but the message that change is possible. That redemption is real, that it is never too late to become who you were meant to be.